Solving equations. In this last day with these silly puzzles, we're going to use simplifying moves and balancing moves to solve complex equations. We've had a busy week with solving equations. You've done 3 different puzzles that have gotten progressively more difficult. What I was hoping for from this week was that you would learn to perform simplifying moves with expressions in an equation to simplify what expressions looked like. We can get rid of parentheses by using the distributive property and reduce the number of terms we're working with by combining like terms. Once expressions are simplified, then we can move on to those balancing moves. Those are the things that you do on both sides of the equal sign. And you've found that we usually begin with adding or subtracting on both sides of the equation to isolate that variable term, and then finish with multiplying or dividing on both sides of the equation to isolate the variable itself. We're going to tackle one last puzzle today, and just like we have in the previous puzzles, I'm going to do a lot of these with you, and then you should be able to finish the rest on your own. This is puzzle 213, and I'm just going to work through 4 of the problems with you. I tried to choose 4 that were going to be representative of all of these problems, but you'll notice that they're out of order, so keep that in mind when you go back to complete this assignment. As always, take a picture of all of your work that you do on lined paper to submit that. You don't need to submit a picture of this puzzle. I have the puzzle. So we'll do problems D, L, B, and C, and I'll talk about what's different about it this time. All right, let's start with problem D. I'll just be writing this down, and I think you have a copy of the same puzzle. It's important to copy the problem down correctly. I'd say about 10% of the time when students tell me that they did something wrong, the only thing they did wrong was copy it down wrong. Okay, so let's take a look at this. We're combining all of the skills that we've talked about this week. We're going to be looking for things that we can simplify, and we're going to be dealing with having variable terms on both sides of the equation. But we've got all of the skills that we need at this point. So we're going to start by looking for any simplifying moves that we can make. And remember that simplifying moves only happen on one side of the equation. I'm just looking at this expression and looking to simplify that. I'm not on both sides of the equation, so there aren't going to be any balancing moves right now. So I see the distributive property. I can distribute the 4 to the 2n, distribute the 4 to the -5, and then I won't have any parentheses, and that'll simplify the way it looks. I'm going to do all my simplifying moves in orange so you can distinguish those from my balancing moves. The number in front of the parentheses is 4. Let's just distribute that. 4 times 2n is 8n. 4 times -5 is -20. And all right, that's everything on the left side of that equation. What's going to be different today is that we might have things to simplify on the other side as well. So I'm just going to check this one. Let's look at this expression on the right side of the equation. I don't see any parentheses. And this is a variable term, this is a constant term, and I can't combine them. So I can't do any of these simplifying moves. So I'm just going to recopy everything on the left side and on the right side. So I'm done simplifying. There's no parentheses, there's no like terms on the left, there's no like terms on the right. So now I'm ready to do the balancing moves. And remember, our goal is to get the variable terms on one side of the equation and the constant terms on the other. It doesn't matter which side we choose to collect all those things on, but it has to be opposite sides in the end. So I'm going to start with these variable terms. I've got one on the left side of the equation, and I've got one on the right side of the equation. I need to make it disappear on one of those sides. So I'm going to choose to make this term disappear. I have 3n on the right side of my equation, and to make it go away, I can just subtract that whole term. But this is a balancing move, so I have to do it on both sides of this equation. 8n minus 3n is 5n. I still have minus 20 here. These n terms canceled to 0, and I'm just left with 10 on the right side of this equation. Now I'm still trying to isolate this variable term. I've gotten all my variable terms together on one side, but now I need to get my constant terms on the other side. And our instinct should kick in at this point. I'm going to add 20 to both sides. This is actually like that very first puzzle you did at this point. I'm left with 5n equals 30. Got one more balancing move. 30 divided by 5 is 6. Ran a little off board there. All right, so this is a combination of all the skills we've done. We had to simplify first. We had to deal with the fact that we have variable terms on each side of this equation. But once we did that, we're back to the very first puzzle that we did. All right, that's our first problem. We're going to do problem L next. It's really similar. Let me start by writing down that correctly. I think I can squeeze it in right here. I want to leave myself plenty of room to work. I'm trying not to waste too much paper. Again, be really careful about writing down the problem correctly. Don't mess up plus and minus signs. Don't skip terms. All right. Bringing together all of our skills. First thing I'm going to do is check for anything that I can simplify. These are just expressions on the left side or the right side of the equation. So let me just cover up the right side of this equation and look at this. I see some parentheses that I can simplify out. So I'm going to use the distributive property here. Let me do that first. 2 times 4x is 8x. 2 times positive 7 is positive 14. Even if it's positive, write the plus in between so that we can see that these are two separate terms. I'm just going to check the right side and see if there's anything that I need to simplify here. Well, I don't see any parentheses, so I can't use the distributive property. And I have a variable term and a constant term that I can't combine. So this is as simplified as I can make it. And I can't simplify this anymore. So now I'm ready for those balancing moves. These are the things that I have to do on both sides of the equation. I can see that I have a variable term on each side. Again, I'm going to try to make it disappear on the right. So if I have 2x and I subtract 2x, that'll cancel to 0. This is a balancing move, so I have to do it on both sides of this equation. And now let's clean this up. 8x minus 2x is 6x. That 14 is still over here. Bring down my equal sign. On the right side, when I subtracted 2x, this canceled to 0. And I was just left with negative 4. Don't lose that negative sign. And I think our instincts are going to tell us what to do from here. Trying to isolate this variable term. Let's subtract 14 from both sides. That leaves me with 6x. This cancels to 0. And negative 4 minus 14 is negative 18. Right. Finally, I'm going to divide both sides by that coefficient of x. Negative 18 divided by 6 is negative 3. You've got to be feeling pretty impressive right now. These are getting to be complicated equations. They get progressively more difficult as we go through this puzzle, giving you lots of good practice. So we're going to skip over a few of these problems and move to this one. This one's going to require us to do some simplifying on the left side of the equation and on the right side of the equation. Let's start by copying it down correctly, and I think I need to get another sheet of paper. So this is problem B. It's at the bottom of the first column. So we have negative 2 multiplied to, in parentheses, we have 18 minus 3y equals 7y plus 2. All right, I'm going to start and look for anything that I can simplify. I'm going to put my thumb over the equal sign and what's on the right. Well, I can see I can simplify this expression by using the distributive property. The number in front of the parentheses is negative 2. Negative 2 times 18 is negative 36. Negative 2 times negative 3y is positive 6y. Remember to put that plus sign between the terms. All right, so I think I've simplified that expression on the left. I can't combine those terms, so this is as simplified as the left side of the equation can get. Oops, I almost did it. I almost wrote this problem wrong. Okay, so this problem on the right side is 7y plus 2y. I forgot the y. Sorry about that. And as I'm looking at that expression just on the right side of this equation, I see that these are like terms that I can combine. So 7y plus 2y is 9y. Oops, should have done that in orange since it was a simplifying move, but I think you understand what's going on. I don't think I can simplify that anymore. Whew. Okay, so now that everything is simplified, I need to collect all of my variable terms on one side of this equation with some balancing moves. Now, I've been eliminating the variable term from the right side of this equation, but if I eliminate this from the right side of the equation, then there's just going to be 0 left over here. So I think this time, instead of eliminating this, I'm going to eliminate the variable term on this side. It wouldn't matter which one you did. It'll work out the same both ways. Okay, so on the left side of this equation, there's my balance right there, the 6y's cancel out, and I'm just left with negative 36 equals 9y minus 6y is 3y. And now I just need to divide both sides by the coefficient of the variable. Divide both sides by 3. 3 divided by 3 cancels to 1. I'm just left with 1y. And negative 36 divided by 3 is negative 12. So in this problem, I wanted to do it because we had to simplify on the left with the distributive property, and we had to simplify on the right by combining like terms. The last problem we're going to do might be the most complicated of them all. There's going to be lots of simplifying to do before we start balancing. Let's just examine this very last problem. I'm skipping over this whole column. You'll go back and do it later. On the right side of my equation, I see the distributive property that I need to do first. After that, I need to combine some like terms. And on the right side of this equation, I have another similar situation. I have the distributive property, and then I'm going to combine some constant terms. All right, let's try to write it down correctly. That's our first challenge. I'm going to give myself plenty of room. This is problem C. 6p minus, and I'm going to start some parentheses, and we'll talk about what the number is in front of the parentheses in just a moment. It's come up before, but I'll remind you of how that goes. So -8 minus 2, and in parentheses, we're multiplying that -2 by p plus 12. All right, like I said, we've got a lot of simplifying to do first. I'm going to cover up the right side of this equation, to put my thumb right there at the parentheses. I'm sorry, right there at the equation, at the equal sign. And the first thing we're going to do is distribute. But the number we're distributing, if you don't see a number in front of the parentheses, remember that that's going to be a 1. Or in this case, -1. So that's what I'm going to distribute to both terms. So let me bring down the 6p. That's not part of my distributing, so I'm just leaving it alone. -1 times 5p is -5p, and -1 times 5 is -5. I'm just going to bring this down. And I'm just going to check to see if there's any more that I can simplify. And in fact, there is. I'm in this expression, I see some like terms that I can combine. That term and that term. Both of them are variable terms. 6p minus 5p is just 1p. If you want to write the 1, you can. And I can't combine that with the -5, but I can't forget about that -5 either. All right, I've simplified the left side as much as I can. I've eliminated parentheses. I've combined all the like terms I can. That's simplified. Oh my gosh, I got to do the same thing over here. I'm going to start by using the distributive property. And I want to caution you about trying to deal with these two numbers first. I'm not going to take -8 and subtract 2 first. And the reason is because we're following the order of operations, actually. We're multiplying before we do any adding and subtracting. So I'm going to distribute this -2 to both of the terms in the parentheses. And that'll make things look a little simpler. And I'm just going to bring this -8 down because it doesn't have anything to do with this distributive property. -2 times p is -2p, and -2 times 12 is -24. Yeah, meant to do it all in orange. Oh well. And now I'm just going to do one last check and see if any of those terms can be combined. I've got 3 terms here. I'm going to ask myself, can I combine that -8 with any of the other terms? Yes, I can. I've got 2 constant terms. This isn't a balancing move. I'm just combining -8 and -24. -8 and -24 are -32. And I can't combine this variable term with anything, so I'm just going to rewrite it here. Oh my gosh, I haven't even started solving yet. This has all just been simplifying, simplifying, simplifying. But now I'm ready to start balancing things. So I'm moving from simplifying moves to balancing moves. Remember, the balancing moves happen on both sides of the equation. Okay. I see variable terms on both sides of the equation, and I need them on one side of the equation. So I'm just going to make them disappear on one side. I'm going to choose to make this term disappear on the right side of that equation hanger. If I add 2p, that'll cancel this to 0. And I can do anything I want as long as I do it to both sides of the equation. Okay, so on the left side, I have p plus 2p, and then I still have this minus 5. And on the right side, the 2's, the negative 2p and the positive 2p cancel to 0. And now my instincts should kick in. Still trying to get p alone. I need to move this negative 5 and make it disappear on the left. That cancels to 0. I'm left with 3p on the left side, and I'm left with negative 27 on the right side. Negative 32 plus 5 is negative 27. There's one last step. We're going to divide by the coefficient of p. I think I need to zoom out here. That almost took a whole page. Well, half a page. But show every step. When you start squeezing things in, you start making mistakes and misreading your own handwriting. You start trying to do things in your head because you don't have enough room. So there's plenty of paper. Use as much as you need to see all of your steps clearly. Start with the simplifying steps, then switch to the balancing steps until you get your solution. So you'll need to complete the rest of these problems for the homework that's due next. Good luck.